Hi, and welcome to today's Daily Chronicle. Today is Thursday, March 13th, 2025. What to know about this week's blood worm moon? Total eclipse. Total lunar eclipse. Light shines from a total lunar eclipse over Santa Monica Beach in California in 2021. Night owls across the U.S. and other parts of the world will be able to see the moon illuminated in a dusty red hue as it passes through the Earth's shadow later this week during the total lunar eclipse. Depending on your time zone, the celestial transit will occur Thursday evening or Friday morning, and be visible in every U.S. state and other parts of the Western Hemisphere. This total lunar eclipse, the first time in 3 years, will feature a blood worm moon, so named after the reddish hue of its glow and the time of year it's occurring. Here's what you need to know. How to view the total lunar eclipse. The total lunar eclipse occurs when the sun, Earth, and moon align in a roughly a straight line, with Earth in the middle. This is also known as syzygy. The eclipse reaches totality as the full moon moves into the darkest parts of the Earth's shadow, called the umbra. People on the West Coast will see this week's total lunar eclipse beginning at 11:26 p.m. on Thursday, while those on the East Coast will see it at 2:26 a.m. Friday morning. Totality will last about 65 minutes. A partial eclipse will begin about an hour and 15 minutes before the total eclipse starts. A map created by NASA shows where on Earth this week's total lunar eclipse will be visible. A dark environment will give you the best view of the eclipse, which can be seen with the naked eye. But a pair of binoculars or telescope might make for a more impressive sight. Because the Earth's shadow will dim the radiance of the moon, you may also be able to see stars right next to the body's edge, according to Sky and Telescope. The magazine also noted that the top half of the moon may appear slightly brighter than the bottom half, since the moon won't be centered in Earth's umbra. The origin of the phrase worm moon. A full moon in March has historically been known as a worm moon, according to the Old Farmer's Almanac. That may be due to the emergence of earthworms around this year, as the weather warms up and spring nears. But the publication offers another explanation for the name. In the 1760s, Captain Jonathan Carver documented that some Native American tribes used it to mark the appearance of beetle larvae from thawing tree bark. Other names given to the March moon by various Native American tribes include the eagle moon, the goose moon, the crow comes back moon, the sugar moon, the wind strong moon, and the sore eyes moon, the almanac says. Why the moon will take on a blood red color. Even though it will be fully in the Earth's shadow, you'll still be able to see the moon. That's because it will be illuminated by light from the sun that passes through the edge of Earth's atmosphere and bends toward the moon. Long wavelength red light traveling through that part of the sky will project a reddish hue onto the moon. Long wavelength red light traveling through that part of the sky will project a reddish hue onto the moon, giving it the sanguine moniker. Or as NASA puts it, the reddish-brown or reddish-orange color of the moon comes from the glow of all the sunrises and sunsets on Earth. Exactly what shade of red the moon will assume may depend on how far into the umbra the moon travels. And what's present in Earth's atmosphere, such as clouds or dust at the time of the eclipse, sky and telescopes say. Trump is trying to remake the presidency. Here's why. President Trump, through orders, firings, and other changes, is remaking the existing system of checks on the president. Supporters say that is exactly the point. No one can say he wasn't upfront about it. It's good to have a strong man at the head of a country. Then candidate Donald Trump declared at a New Hampshire campaign rally back in January 2024. It's in his successful comeback bid. Trump spent the entire campaign praising strongman leaders and vowing to uproot the administrative state and seek retribution against his political enemies. And when asked to promise that he would never abuse power as retribution against anybody by Fox News host Sean Hannity in 2023, he replied, "Except for day one." We're closing the border and we're drilling. After that, I'm not a dictator, okay? Trump continued. Since he assumed office just 7 weeks ago, the second-term president has unleashed an unprecedented assault on the workings of the executive branch, challenging the independence of the Justice Department, firing independent inspectors general across 18 federal agencies, effectively shuttering watchdog agencies like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and attempting to take operational control of independent agencies like the Securities and Exchange Commission, which oversees Wall Street, and the Federal Election Commission, which oversees elections. All of these actions are setting up legal fights as to the scope of executive power, said Tara Malloy, who directs appellate litigation and strategy at the Campaign Legal Center, a government watchdog group. That said, I fear that we should not see them as some sort of academic, legal argument or fight, Malloy added. This administration is attempting to exert control and authority over the operations of federal government in a way that's unprecedented. The CLC is particularly opposed to Trump's attempt to fire Ellen Weintraub, the chair of the Federal Election Commission, FEC. Independent agencies cannot simultaneously be neutral and fair enforcers of the law and also be answerable only to the president, Malloy said. The CLC, I think you can see the basic unfairness if you were to flip the situation. If, for instance, the Biden administration had exerted presidential control over the FEC, would President Trump think that in his 2024 campaign was getting a fair shake? This seems completely contrary to everything we know about Trump. The case for more energetic executive. Trump's actions have sparked chaos across the executive branch, but there's a theory that ties it all together. According to John Yoo, a conservative legal scholar who served in the Justice Department under President George W. Bush, prior to the Watergate scandal, American presidents enjoyed far fewer constraints on their power. After President Richard Nixon resigned in scandal over his abuses of that power, Congress, under the control of Democrats at the time, spent years passing laws to constrain or check presidential power by, for instance, creating the Inspectors General role to serve in federal agencies to report on waste, wrongdoing, and inefficiencies. We're still living with those laws today. And one way to understand what Trump is trying to do, and I'm not saying even that Trump understands this, is what he's doing, but the presidency, the way it's designed, urges him to do it, as he's trying to snap those bounds that were imposed on the presidency in the post-Watergate era, you said. This idea, called the unitary executive theory, has long been popular in far-right conservative circles and has been promoted in the conservative government blueprint, Project 2025, but is now being tested in real time by the Trump administration. The argument, according to supporters like you, is that the Constitution puts the power of the executive branch into one person, the President. And as a result, the President should have the power to command the executive branch at will. In the simplest term, the President can hire or fire whoever they want. Now, that can be risky or dangerous, of course. But the founders thought that was outweighed by the virtues of having a single person who could act quickly, could act with speed, could act with decision and capability. You said the famous phrase of Hamilton, used as good government, is defined by energy in the executive. And to have that energy, you need to have the power in one person. Deputy White House Chief of Staff Stephen Miller explained the administration's view on Trump's power. During a February 20 press briefing, while discussing cuts made by White House advisor Elon Musk and his government efficiency project. A president is elected by the whole American people. He's the only official in the entire government that is elected by the entire nation, right? Judges are appointed, members of Congress are elected by the entire nation, right? Members of Congress are elected at the district or state level. Just one man, Miller said. And the Constitution, Article 2, has a clause, known as the vesting clause. And it says, the executive power shall be vested in a president, singular. The whole will of democracy is imbued into the elected president. The president then appoints staff to then impose that democratic will onto the government. He went on to describe tenured civil servants who believe they answer to no one as a threat to democracy. Watchdogs sounding the alarm. Watchdogs say Trump's actions are having a chilling effect not only on the forces of government aiming at stopping corruption, but also on the government officials who remain in agencies waiting to see what happens next. I don't think it's inconsequential that removing the heads of those officers whose job it is to protect whistleblowers and prevent corruption and wrongdoings were the early targets of the Trump administration. I think what's also important is the signal that sends to all those who are left behind, said Daniel O'Brien, executive director of the Project on Government Oversight, which investigates corruption. All of the officers and the laws that have been set up to prevent corruption and abuse of power are explicitly being targeted and undermined. Scott Grityak, Director of Advocacy for Transparency International U.S., and an anti-corruption lawyer and advocate, was more measured. Multiple lights in the sky doesn't necessarily mean there's a constellation, and I'm hoping there's not a constellation. but simply factually too early to tell, he said. I don't think that this comes from some coordinated whole of government nexus of corruption. I just don't think we're there yet. I think we're going to find out if we get there, or we may find out as soon as in the next 6 months. The Trump administration has also yet to issue an executive order imposing ethical guidelines for the administration and high-level political appointees, which presidents typically do, despite employing more billionaires than any cabinet in history, with many financial conflicts before the government. I'm not saying that there is necessarily corruption in the administration, but I am saying that it creates a much bigger risk that there will be at least an appearance. And when that happens, there needs to be accountability, because we need to know, again, the government is operating in the public interest, said Daniel Weiner, director of the Elections and Government Program at the Brennan Center for Justice, a center-left research organization. Who asked for this? There's little evidence that the American public is clamoring for a more powerful president. If anything, voters seem to like the separation of powers the way it is. According to 2024 polling by Vanderbilt University's Unity Poll, just 6% of Americans support increasing presidential power. The vast majority, 63%, were happy with the status quo. Just last month, a CNN poll showed a narrow majority of Americans, 52%, say Trump has gone too far in exercising presidential power. However, a second-term president is not as captive to popular political sentiment since he is barred from appearing on the ballot again, although Trump has repeatedly raised the idea that he could challenge the two-term constitutional limit on the president. For now, the check on Trump's power is in federal courts, which more than 100 cases challenging his executive actions are underway. But the courts move slowly, and Trump has not shied away from criticizing judges, nor has his advisor, businessman Elon Musk, who has publicly called for some judges to face impeachment for rulings that have slowed or stopped Trump's efforts to remake the federal government. What's at stake? Scores of lawsuits challenging the Trump administration's actions are making their way through the federal courts. But you said that that is part of Trump's strategy. Trump is clearly setting up a test case to go back to the Supreme Court, said you, who said the administration is likely to test a 1935 Supreme Court ruling that limits presidential power to remove certain officials serving in the executive branch. A 6-3 conservative court is more hospital place for Trump to have that legal fight, and the court has been sympathetic in recent years to these arguments. In 2020, the court ruled that the president has had the power to fire the head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's almost like Trump is heeding the call of the Supreme Court to test whether any of these independent agencies can really remain in the framework of our 18th century Constitution anymore, you said. The Supreme Court already handed Trump nearly absolute power over the Justice Department in 2024, ruling regarding presidential immunity, including the ability to have conversations about criminal cases and other enforcement actions. If Trump is successful in breaking all or some of the binds put on the president in the post-Watergate era of American politics, with little or no independent checks on the president and politicized agencies, accountability could still come in two forms. The ballot box and the other branches of government. Voters can oust unpopular presidents, and Congress can pass laws to rein one in, as well as exercise the impeachment powers to remove a president. While that might be true for future presidents, Trump as a second-term president is not as swayed in public opinion. And a Congress ruled by the same party as the president is much more willing to acquiesce to the demands of the executive. You acknowledge that the expanding executive power isn't a one-party advantage. It used to be after World War II, in the wake of FDR and Truman. Kennedy and LBJ, Democrats used to be the ones who liked the unitary executive, and it was Republicans like Taft who opposed it, he said. So I don't think it's a really Republican-Democrat thing at all. These reforms will ultimately play to an advantage of a Democratic president someday.